Hello everyone, welcome back to Crestview Maple Farms YouTube channel. Thanks for tuning in. Back here in the pump house, sap's running, but today's video is going to be a little bit different one. You guys see that are new to the channel, who have subscribed to the channel, you kind of see my operation and what I've got going on, but you really don't know how I got started in this and where my maple background comes from. My great-grandfather was one of the biggest maple producers in the state of New York in his time. His name was Murray Benjamin. It was my grandma's father. I'm going to take you on a little ride here, and I'm going to show you where one of the biggest maple operations in the state was in the 1960s and 70s and probably early 80s until some of his family took over and kept it going for a little while. I'm going to take you up and show you some of the history of where I get my maple from and why it's in my blood. And I hope you guys enjoy this, because this guy back in his time was the man. Here we go. I'm in the town of Burlington, which our town, there's not much here. There's a church, a blinking light. There used to be a store right here, right next to me. When I was a kid, there used to be a big store right here. There's only 7 houses here in town, and one of them belonged to my great-grandfather, and I'll show you. That white house over there, that was my great-grandfather's house. And I remember going in that house when I was just a young lad. I couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old. But I can remember my great-grandmother making sugar in there. So that's where my great-grandma and grandpa used to live, right there. Now we're going to head up here to where their sugar bush was, which 2 seconds from town here. We're turning on Sugar Bush Road here. How fitting is that? The road is named Sugar Bush Road. This is a dead-end road here. There's a couple houses out here. There's some relatives that still live out here, but this is where his main operation was, right out Sugar Bush Road here. I never come out this road. This is probably, I don't know, in my lifetime, probably been out this road 15 times, because it's a dead-end road. It's really no place to go here, but I'll show you. There's not going to be much to see here. I'm pretty sure the building's gone, but you'll get the idea. Right over there is the remnants of his sugar bush on the right-hand side. This is something different. I haven't been down in here. In years. Yeah, there's nothing left here. Just a turnaround. This is all that's left right here. You can see some remnants of some big maple trees over there, but it looks to me like stuff got dozed up down there. Some remnants of the old building. Pretty much right here, this dirt spot is where his sugar house sat. All he had was buckets, but he had 5,000 taps right behind the sugar house right here. So 5,000 taps here, and then he had another 5,000 roadside trees that were spread all around the adjoining towns here: Burlington, Hartwick, Cedarville. So just imagine that, 5,000 roadside trees. There's no roadside trees left anymore, but you can see the remnants of some big maples. There's 3 of them down there, and that's what he tapped. So I wanted to come up here and show you this. There's really nothing left to see here. Maybe some old tin. He did have a huge underground tank. I think it was a 5,000 or maybe 10,000 gallon underground tank. There is one big maple left right there. But right here is where it all happened. So I didn't want to stick around there and get yelled at by the landowners, but it's just a shame. Like, you can see the remnants of the trees out there. There are some huge maple trees out there on the left-hand side here. How I found out all the information about my great-grandfather is my grandmother put together this, like, I don't want to call it like a scrapbook, because it was better than a scrapbook, but it was just all old newspaper clippings that I read through and tried to absorb as much information as I could. But so back then, in the 60s, 70s, he was a pioneer for maple. Like, they started their family farm. Fred was 1 dairy cow, and then he grew his dairy operation to 40 head. When he was growing his dairy head, he was buying more land, and he was putting more taps in, and he kept growing his maple operation. What I'm reading is he had 10,000 taps. One year he had 12,000 taps, But on the year that he had 10,000 taps, he made 5,000 gallons of maple syrup. Can you imagine that? Made 5,000 gallons of maple syrup that one year is because the sugar content was over 4% sugar. So if you can compare that to nowadays, like my sugar averages 1.1% on the year. It takes me a vacuum pump to get all the sap that I can to be able to do that. So he was basically doing all that back in his time without a vacuum pump, and the sugar content was way up. He made a half a gallon per tap without vacuum. That is insane to me. Barely get a half a gallon per tap now with a vacuum pump. That just shows you the difference in how much sugar the trees put out back then compared to what they do now. If you don't have vacuum now, if you're a gravity system, you don't even get runs half the time. I mean, you'll get runs, but not like vacuum. So I'm just amazed at the operation that he had. You know, another thing cool back then is he was so far ahead of his time. He was using oil and air injection on his evaporators. So just imagine that. You know, he was buying oil in the off season. These newspaper clippings is pretty much where I learned everything. So that's some pretty cool history right there of how I got maple in my blood. It's handed down, you know, it's something that's in the blood. And there's this valley right here, the Butternut Valley. This is called the Butternut Valley where I live, and that's because the Butternut Creek runs down through the valley. This valley's noted for making maple syrup, and I'm going to show you some of that. Pretty awesome valley, isn't it? So we're almost down here to my uncle's. My uncle Adrian, this was my grandmother's brother. Murray was his dad. He made syrup for years, and he's passed away. Aunt Martha's still here, she's still alive, but this is just one of many places in the Butternut Valley that was making maple syrup for so many years. So I decided to stop at my Aunt Martha's, and we're going to walk in the house, and you're going to get a chance to meet her and see if she'll talk a little bit about great-grandfather, which was her husband's father, her father-in-law. I'm in my Aunt Martha's house. This is my Aunt Martha Benjamin. She knows quite a bit about the history of my great-grandfather, and I figured I would stop here because that was her father-in-law. She was married to his son, Uncle Adrian. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Aunt Martha, and maybe some of the family, and a little bit of the history.
I was only 17 when I came into the Benjamin family. The first time, my husband took me up to meet his parents. It was like in February or something, and I said, I wore a dress and stocking and high heel shoes, not knowing I was going to go into snow. I helped Grandpa sugar it for a couple of years, and I said, because I was at that time 5'1", and I said, so I was really quite short when we were out tapping and into snow up to my waist sometimes, or my knees at least. And I said, we had a lot of good times. It was a lot of hard work, but Grandpa kept going right with us all the time. And I said, one time when we were tapping, Rexy Urenka was tapping, and he tapped a tree that was not a maple tree. But then we were using pills to keep the trees open longer.
Yes, they could use pills.
So I put the pill in, and somebody else, maybe Jeanette or somebody, came up behind me and put the spout and hook in. And Grandpa come up behind, and he tapped it in. So Rexy got a couple trees away.
So they tap it in with a hammer, or how would they put the pill?
They put it in with a hammer, and Rexy got a couple feet away, and he stood there and he watched Murray put the spout and tap the spout and hook in. And he says to Rex said to Murray, how much sap do you think you'll get out of that beech tree or whatever it was? And Murray looked up and he laughed, and we laughed about that for 5 or 10 minutes. We tapped by buckets.
Everything was buckets.
Everything was buckets, so it took a lot more manpower.
How many people do you think was working for his operation in a peak of his operation?
I think 24.
Wow. So
It was almost all family. Charlie Bolton worked for him. I was trying to think who else was there, but on Mom, Grandma, and Aunt Zella used to make meals.
So they would feed all the guys
They
at
would
the end
feed
of the day?
them, and we had to kind of eat in shifts because the table was big enough for maybe 10 or 12, but not 24.
Wow.
We had, this is a funny thing, Aunt Zella put a bowl in front of me, and I thought it was potato soup, but it was parsnip soup. So I said to Grandma, "Do you have any peanut butter and jelly?" But we had a lot of laughs. It was a lot of hard work, and sometimes the bulldozer, because it was on those cleats or whatever, we'd get onto a snowbank and it would kind of just slide down like this. And if we were out in the woods and if we had a full tank, we got on the trailer to ride back. So I said, once I saw it starting to slide, I said, I'm walking. I said, but it was funny. We had a lot of good laughs.
Simple times back then, wasn't
Simple times back then. And I said, I know that at least one of the List boys worked for Grandpa.
There was a bunch. I'm pretty sure like most everybody that lived, from what I was reading in the articles and people you talked to, like my dad worked for him, Uncle Tom worked for him, all the Benjamin boys worked there. Norm McCumber, I think he was one that worked
Norman
there.
worked there. Irene worked there too.
I mean, it's everybody pretty much in this community, surrounding area worked for him one time or another.
Because it was like with Charlie Bolton, he came after he got chores done in the morning, you know.
And that's where I learned. That's how I learned how to do maple, was through Uncle Charlie.
Oh yeah.
Down in the old sugar shack,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So, like, was he pretty big for his time? Do you know anything like about was he one of the bigger producers in the state?
He was the biggest producer in New York State.
In the
state of New York.
And what years can you recall?
I know I worked for him 66.
In 1966.
And that year, we had made so much syrup and a lot of really nice fancy syrup. They had to come in with a tractor trailer to get that to get the syrup in the drums.
How did they load tractor trailers back then?
I have no idea. If they made to put boards out and they just rolled them up.
Wow.
I don't have a clue.
Yeah, they may have rolled them up. I've done that before with a waste oil barrel, roll it up. I'm sure they didn't have no crane gantry or anything.
No.
So Grandma was making like sugar and cream and all that, and she was shipping that across the entire country, right? Was she shipping to different states?
They used to go to the state fair.
Okay.
And they'd stay up there, and while she was there, she would make candy and cream.
I think I read in one of the articles she sent like maple products to Michigan. That was one of the states I saw.
Oh, she could have.
And there was another couple states that like more towards the West Coast.
Yeah. Well, candy, they had a special box, and all the leaves were put in little, like cup liners or stuff. And I said, then she had a special iron that was about like this, and it was very tiny, but it sealed the plastic on the candy. So, and I said, I know May 10th, we were washing buckets. Edlis was. But Grandpa May had made this barrel that had the brushes on it, and you put the bucket in the container and got some water in it, and then you put it up on the brushes.
He made this. He made this himself to wash buckets.
And
cool.
So I said, then there was almost always two of us girls cleaning, because Edlis liked to do it really fast. You can edit out this part. But then two of us girls had to be there with brushes to get down inside where he hadn't got.
That's typical in life. Most men, they like just to rush through the situation, where a woman, she usually does it thoroughly.
But I said, they did really well, and I said, I was surprised that they managed to go to the state fair as long as they did.
So they would take the syrup to the state fair, and was it like a judge? Like they get judged on the flavor? Is that what it was, or they're just selling it at the state fair?
Well, they sold it there, but they also made the sugar and the cream there.
Oh.
And I said, Mom did a lot with the sugar and the cream, but it's funny that when Mom made the cream, she would do that first before she made the candy, because it took longer to cool. They set it in the bathtub.
Yep, the ice baths.
Yeah. Yep. And whatever. And I said, with Grandpa, he always would drive with the station wagon, and Uncle Donald was carrying the tapper, and I rode in the back on the tailgate. Until Grandpa's driving got so bad, we decided it wasn't safe for us to ride on the tailgate anymore.
So he lived to be 80.
Grandpa was 90.
He lived to be 90 years old. So he sugared. When did he start sugaring?
I think he started when he was a boy.
Wow. So he sugared his whole life.
Yeah, his whole life basically, and when he wasn't farming.
Donald, his son, took over for a while, right?
Yep.
And then did Uncle Adrian help him at that point, or no?
We did our own down here.
You were doing your own at that
Yeah.
point. So what year do you think you guys? So Grandpa passed away. What year do you remember? Probably
I
don't
have no
remember what year
idea.
that was. I know I can remember. So I was born in '76. You were born again when?
I was born in 39.
39. So I was born in '76, and I can remember going in that sugar house one time. My dad took me there. I had to be like, he must have been still alive in '76. He must have passed away probably around the 80.
I really couldn't tell you.
But anyways, I remember meeting him a couple times in Grandma, because I remember going in the house up in town. But I can remember my dad taking me to the sugar house one time. Now, remember, I'm just a little fella at that time. And we get to the door, and I can hear this rumbling, just this rumbling sounds. And I remember the door flying open, and all I saw was steam coming out. And every guy that I saw in that place, his face looked like a red tomato. I was like scared. I didn't even know what that was. I was like, what is this? And I mean, you couldn't see in there. It was just
Grandpa had 5 evaporators.
That is
And
insane.
I said it was mostly us girls drew off. Made so many gallons of syrup.
He made 5,000. So I read he made 5,000 gallons of syrup one year on 10,000 taps. That's insane. That's a half a gallon per tap.
And of course, we used to go out on the road a lot too.
He said they had 5,000 trees in the sugar bush, and then there was another 5,000 roadside trees between Burlington
The
and
roadside
Hartwick.
trees had higher sugar content.
That's what it said. It said it averaged like over 4% sugar.
Yep.
That's like, you know what I average right now? 1.1.
May 10th, we were washing buckets, and it started to rain. So Grandpa said, well, let's go in and have a cup of coffee and get warm. We sat in there for probably half an hour to 45 minutes, and when we came out, there was 6 inches of snow on the ground. That was May 10th.
So what was his typical season like? When would it start roughly, and when would it end?
We started lots of times tapping in January, and then we would have 2 weeks where we didn't work at all. And then we had February sometimes got busy, and I know one time I went up to work, and it was so cold the sap wasn't running, so I sat in the house because your grandmother canned most of the syrup.
Grandma did.
Yep. And I said, so she was working at school then. So Grandpa said, well, as long as you're here, do you want to can some syrup? I said, I don't know how to do it, and I certainly can't be as fast as Dorothy. Nobody was as fast as her. Grandpa was not.
He was a pretty simple guy, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, but he, towards the tail end when he couldn't do it anymore, he kind of would forget and things like that.
So he sugared his whole life right up to 90, just about 90 years old.
Yeah, I think he was 90 when he passed, but I said...
I think back, I think of the technology that we have now, he would be in his glory. If he had vacuum pumps and tubing systems, he could have piped that whole sugar bush right into the building,
And I said, now the woods that Russell has now, they were always called the late ones because we tapped them last. They hang colder for some reason, so we gathered them last. They were the last ones that we pulled.
That's pretty cool. I think he'd be looking down now and be pretty proud that I'm trying to do what I'm doing, and Russ is doing. There's still a couple of us. Scott's still making syrup. So it's still. I was trying to do the history of this valley. This valley's pretty rich in maple. It always has been. You know.
Yeah.
And it's sad that all the old timers are pretty much gone. It's hard to find somebody to talk to, and that's why I wanted to stop and talk to you because I knew you would have some good information, good history.
Well, I have funny stuff. I'm not too good on date-wise and stuff, but pretty easy going to work for. Once in a while, he got a little angry, but when I started say to you when we had that really good year, we boiled 5 days straight, 24 hours a day. 5 evaporators. Adrian and I took a night. Donald and Jeanette took a night. Murray and Evelyn took a night. Rich and Pat took a night.
Wow.
And I don't know if by the 5th night we were back to us again or what, but we did. I said 24-hour shifts. It was long days.
What I compare Grandpa to is to like there's some big operations now up in Vermont. There's guys that got 200,000-300,000 tap operations. He was that caliber in the 60s.
Yeah.
He was. 10,000 buckets? I mean, there's nobody in their right mind that would put 10,000 buckets up nowadays. Could you imagine walking through the hills, try to get trees, and there's no roadside trees left anymore either. All them big. Remember how nice it used to be up there, up the road here, maples up by Scott's, both sides. They're all gone. They've all died. So
now, when I go to Cooperstown for doctor's appointment, and I see all your tap line, is that where the only place you tap is down that hill?
I have another lease off my cousin up past our house. I have 4,400 in that woods, and then I have another 2,000 in another woods. Yeah. And then this summer I got more room in that same woods to expand up there on 80. And so I'm thinking hopefully there's 9,000 on that hill.
Do you have any idea what Grandpa paid a tap?
No idea.
10 cents a tap.
So he leased woods too?
Yes.
I didn't know
up
that.
in West Winfield and Richfield Springs, you know. And like I said, we did Leonardsville Bank. Mm-hmm. And like if you put 4 buckets on a tree, you got 40 cents a tree.
You know what I pay per tap? $1.
Really? Whoa.
I just appreciate you letting me stop in and talk to you.
Well, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you more date-wise and stuff. But
well, you did pretty good. You said the 60s. I mean, 60s and 70s, right? I mean, that's...
I think I started working for Grandpa in 66. That was the first year he made so much syrup.
That's 11 years before I was born. This was my Aunt Martha. She's a wonderful woman. I love her with all my heart. Thank you for doing this little interview with me so we can get a little history on Grandpa.
Okay. You're more than welcome.
What a wonderful 85-year-old woman right there. So much history. I hope you guys enjoyed the interview. It was fun. She told me I could come over here and look in the old sugar house. So we're going to take a gander in here quick. I was able to get through the hole in the wall. Here we go. Take a look at this history. These big old evaporators. So this was my Uncle Adrian's setup. His dad was Murray Benjamin. He was using oil injection. It was pretty cool. Got the pans all stood up. This is where Uncle Adrian did all his canning in here, jugging of the syrup. Still got some old samples in here. Not sure how long they've been sitting in here, probably for quite a few years. Looks like he had something for his filters to wring out the water, wring them clean. Yeah, pretty awesome history in here. I spent quite a bit of time in here when I was a kid too. I'd stop in on occasion and see how they were making out. This one's a big evaporator here. This looks like it was 5 wide, or this one looks like it was 5 wide by 12 or 13, not exactly sure. The other one's a little bit smaller, but some pretty cool history here. All right, I'm gonna pop out of here quick and head back up the hill. So I'm gonna show you where it all got started for me. And this was on my uncle's dairy farm. Now, I don't think anybody's home here, so I'm not gonna drive out there, but I'm gonna pull over on the side of the road and show you where I started making maple syrup at 19 years old. You see that red building over there? There's a little gray building to the right of it. Right there. That's where I started making maple syrup. I wonder if they're home here, if I can pull over in here and check that out quick. We'll see. I don't think George is even here. We'll pull in here and see if I can go look at it. So I'm gonna pull right up here by the sugar house quick. It's probably not a sugar house anymore. It's probably a chicken coop if I had to guess. Yep. That is where I started making maple syrup, right here. Woodshed right here. You can see a couple remnants of some tanks. That's where I got my start. A lot of memories come back to me standing here, walking around. The old cupola still up on top. There's another sap tank out back here, but this little 20 by 20 shed is where I started. This is where how I learned how to make maple syrup. Get a little emotional when I look at that. A lot of good times in there. And I sure do miss my uncle who taught me everything I know. That's one thing I can tell you, people that are watching my channel, subscribe, cherish all the people in your life, because they're not here forever. We're not here forever. So back in 1994-ish, when I graduated high school, I started helping my uncle here. We had about 300 taps, mainly roadside trees. We did have one little gravity line system. But yeah, I mean, I would gather these buckets in the snow up to my knees, bring the sap back for him to boil. We had a 2.5 by 8, I believe. That's how I got started. That's how we made our maple syrup. It was awesome times. Now we're down to the next farm down, and this is Eric and Neil Lindberg. They also made syrup, and I'll show you the sugar house. You can see it out behind that hangar. That building with that cupola on it back there. There's 2 evaporators in there. I believe they're 3x12s. They no longer make maple syrup, but they did. Back when my uncle was doing it, my Uncle Charlie, and then my Uncle Adrian, they were doing it. It was us 3 maple producers in this valley making syrup all the time. You want to know where I get my history and why I'm into the maple? This is why I'm into it. It's kind of in the blood, you know? A little bit farther down the line here, and this is where my cousin Scott makes maple syrup now, and I did make some syrup in here for a little while myself. That's Uncle Charlie, who taught me everything I know. He built that building, you know, years before he passed away. And he moved his evaporator into there after he sold the farm, and he made syrup in there for a while. I've made syrup in there. You know, a bunch of my family members have made syrup in there, and my cousin Scott is making syrup in there now. Maple is rich and deep in history in this valley right here, and it's in my blood, and I love doing it. And that's how Crestview Maple Farm got started, basically. You know, everything I learned growing up. And I just kind of want to keep expanding and getting bigger. And we're heading back up the valley. Also, I tapped those woods over there on that hill at one point. I've been all over in this valley. Like I say, I grew up in this valley. It was the best way to grow up, it really was. All the old timers that were around were wonderful people. You learn so much from them too, you know. There's not many of them left. I can count them on one hand. So right here, these are some examples of some roadside trees that my great-grandfather used to tap. I've tapped these same trees. These trees have been tapped for I don't know how many years. Years. Look at the size of those trees. 4 or 5 buckets hanging on them. You know, those trees, they gave out a really high sugar content because they have big, tall crowns right out in the open. Wouldn't you know it, there's Rex Urinka right there, just past him. He's a legend in this neck of the woods too. He used to make syrup for years. All right, I gotta fly back up to the pump house, but. All right, so it was a long day. Sap did run in between trying to make this video for you, so had to deal with that a little bit. It wasn't a big run, so I had a little extra time on my hands, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoy the history, where it comes from and how I got started. I hope you enjoy this part 1 because it's not done yet. I'm going to track down Rex Urinka, and you guys are going to like to hear what he has to say. He was a maple producer in this valley for a long time. He also worked for my great-grandfather, so he's got lots of history, and he's a funny guy. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, but stay tuned for part 2, talking with Rex Urinka, a maple legend in our valley. Thanks for watching.